Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be studying the Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, Paragraph 1 through 5. As you grab Michael Holler's book, I'd like to thank you for joining us as we take one step further on our journey through the history and foundation of the United States of America. Why did this nation separate? How was it set up? What do we need to do to keep it going? Join us as we discuss these questions and more. Would you like to be part of what we're doing? Pray for each other and for us, fellowship in your own study, and then go forth and make disciples. All right, who is reading first?
This is Chuck. Bear with me. I have an interesting format here. Article 2, Section 1. The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. He shall hold his office during the term of 4 years, and together with a vice president chosen for the same term, be elected as follows. Now, that section seems to have been amended
Really?
in 2.1.1
Actually, go ahead and
in
just
the
keep reading the second paragraph.
all right. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislator therefore may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. But no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. The electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for two persons, of whom one at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. That sentence is underlined as changed by the 12th Amendment.
Yep.
Uh,
So
and
it's at this time I'd like to apologize. Doug hasn't gotten his book yet, and we're now diving into probably one of the most amended sections of the Constitution. So do your best to follow along, but we're going to do what we can. Joshua, I'm
Appreciate it.
going to start. Oh, what's that?
Said appreciate it.
Okay.
I'll do my
By,
best.
by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this took us about 5 minutes to figure out how this whole thing was set up before we even started. So as you're diving in and you feel overwhelmed, welcome to the party, pal. All right. So starting with that amended paragraph 3, or what is called 2.1.3a, and reading through what is part 3, I don't know where we're at. Anyway, what it's called anymore. The electors must meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president. They may not vote for a president and a vice president who are both residents of the same state as the electors. They must name in one set of ballots the person they voted for as president, and in a different set of ballots the person they voted for as vice president. They must make separate lists of all the persons they voted for as president, and of all the persons they voted for as vice president, and the number of votes for each. They must sign these lists and certify that they are correct, and send them sealed to the president of the Senate. Uh, Going back to the original text, the president of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes shall be the president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. Back to modern reading, amended by the 12th Amendment. If no person receives a majority, then the House of Representatives must immediately elect the president by ballots. They must choose him or her from the three persons with the highest number of voters. In choosing the president, the votes must be taken by states, and each state will have one vote. A quorum for this purpose will consist of at least one member from two-thirds of the states, and a majority of all states will be necessary for the election to be final. Continuing in the amended sections. If the president-elect dies before the beginning of his term or her term, noon January 20th, then the vice president-elect will become president. If a president has not been chosen before the beginning of his or her term, Or if the president-elect does not qualify, then the vice president-elect will act as president until a qualified president is chosen. In case neither a president-elect nor a vice president-elect qualifies, Congress may provide for this by law. This law will determine who will act as president or the way in which the acting president will be selected. This person will act as president until a qualified president or vice president is chosen. Once again, this next paragraph is due to the 12th Amendment. Oh, the previous one was also the 20th Amendment. So the 12th and 20th have been chopping this section up. Just in case you're lost, so am I. The person receiving the greatest number of votes for vice president will become the vice president as long as he or she receives a majority of the total number of electors. If no person receives a majority, then the Senate must choose the vice president between the two persons with the highest number of votes. A quorum for this purpose will consist of 2/3 of the total number of senators, and a majority of the total number will be necessary for the election to be final. If a person is not eligible under the Constitution to be president of the United States, that person will not be eligible to be vice president either. Back to the original text. Oh no, that's paragraph 4. That's you, Gage.
Yep. All right. So I'm going to read Article 2, Section 1, paragraphs 4 and 5. The Congress may determine the time of choosing the electors and the day on which they shall give their votes, which day shall be the same throughout the United States. No person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of president. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained to the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States.
All right. Oh boy, my mouth hurts. First thoughts.
Going back to the beginning again, even though Section 1, first two paragraphs, do not note they've been changed by an amendment, they clearly have, because it only states that the term of 4 years for both the president and the vice president. But if you read the modern text, it reads, he or she will hold his or her office for a term of 4 years, not to exceed 2 terms.
That's true, yeah.
And it further goes on to say that when the term will begin and end at noon on January 20th. And then also in the second paragraph, it adds Washington, D.C., where it says each state shall appoint. The new language says each state and Washington, D.C. must appoint. So I don't know where those got amended, but they certainly did.
Is it possible that this section has been amended so much and by so many different directions that you just lost track? That the author just lost track?
Very possible.
I will grant them leniency because this is a real mouthful.
I think we should just clarify. So all the sections that say changed by, the X amendment, on the modern side, it's still saying what the Constitution originally said. The modern side is not changed with the amendments, though.
How so?
Yeah, I've got a totally different book than you guys because my modern side does have the amendment language.
Josh, what are you saying?
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of weird that, yeah, he's talking about the first paragraph of the third paragraph. I just don't know what to call it other than paragraph. It's the paragraph with 7 baby paragraphs in it. It's a pregnant paragraph. It says pretty much the same thing, and it says changed by the 12th Amendment. And it spells it out, but it doesn't change as much as what you pointed out, Chuck. The 2-term limits and the other point you made.
Adding the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that one. Um,
I might have to take that back because I was remembering from Article 1 about the three-fifths part of the Constitution where the non-free persons would count as three-fifths of a vote. I misremembered that still being read that way in the modern version, but I'm looking back now and it's not.
yeah.
I think the modern version does represent amendments added to it or changed.
So this is the amendment process at work, and this is why some people are calling for a convention of the states, which we'll get into a little bit later, because language does need to be cleaned up. So so this lays out the much dreaded College of Electors. This is the setup for that, and it's set up as we saw back in Article 1, except for you, Doug, you weren't here. That the Congress is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives should represent the people, and the Senate should represent the states. So those electors, so the College of Electors are equal to Congress, basically. And yeah. And quite honestly, this has been so chopped up, I'm kind of lost right now. And I think that was that the point? Because the 12th Amendment is right before the 13th, and the 13th was put in by the Republicans and the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln. And I'm not sure when the 20th was added, which we'll get to. Actually, I think I can go back. Amendment.
Well, I'm glad it's not just me that's confused.
Yeah. March 2nd, 1932.
For the 20th, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
later on we get amendments that are amended by amendments.
Yeah.
Oh, we get there. That'll be fun.
One of the biggest, easiest ones to point out is prohibition. Telling the country it couldn't drink and then saying, that was a really bad idea. Let's just scratch that one out. We'll see that coming up there a little bit later. So the fact is, yes, you can amend amendments. Not only can you amend the Constitution, but you can amend the amendments to the Constitution, which I
Good
think
to
the
know.
20th might amend the 12th in
Yeah.
the section.
So currently in the book, is it saying how many amendments is it showing just for Article 2? Because you said there was a lot. Now I'm just trying to follow along the best I can without the book, and I see that they specifically, mentioned two, the 12th and the 25th.
It is those two amendments, but several times. In fact,
So
the 20th Amendment adds 3 paragraphs to the pregnant paragraph.
Yes. Yeah. 20 amends Amendment 12.
Yeah.
oh, got it.
So once again, let's take a look at baby America, because this was America in the crib when this was written. Um, 13 colonies just survived a war. War of 1812 hasn't happened yet, or was about to. And they are setting up the federal government. And they thought back then, and one of the amendments took care of this, that the president and vice president should be whoever gets the most votes, and vice president is whoever got the next most votes. But because political parties being what they were, they had to change it so that the vice president could be in the same political party as the president. Otherwise, the commander in chief would be hamstrung in his execution of the law by having his number 2 guy being politically opposed to him. Imagine the last presidents, not this current one, but the last one being President Biden and Vice President Trump.
There would have been nothing done. It's an interesting idea though, because I'm sure they made that part of the Constitution originally with that in mind, but they probably didn't realize the extent of the division that it would cause.
Yep.
So it didn't last long.
Thanks to Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, put that to death. Also, they made sure that president and vice president couldn't reside in the same state. That's an important thing buried in this text. So
Hmm.
that way, the chief executive would not be, once again, over representing a state. Which raises the question for me, is Trump from New York or Florida?
Well, he's got one of his homes right down the street here.
Yeah.
That's why he chose the VP from Ohio.
Yeah.
One of the reasons, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, there's some footnotes on the section that talks about the terms, and the footnote says that it was actually changed to 2 terms in Amendment 22. So now you have Amendment 20, Amendment 22, and Amendment 25 referenced in this article.
Oh, we haven't reached Amendment 25 yet. That's in paragraph 6.
Oh,
Wait.
okay.
Paragraph 6 is also a pregnant paragraph.
So Amendment 22 didn't come around until 1947. So I want to say there was a president that served 3 terms, but I could be making something up. Yeah.
Or President Roosevelt, the second President Roosevelt that we've had, the first being Teddy, this one being Franklin, won 4 presidential terms, died in his 4th. And after that, it was decided to actually make the amendment for only 2 terms.
Yeah. Yeah. He died 5 and Amendment 27 came in 47. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So I'm not sure if Roosevelt serving 4 terms was a good thing or a bad thing, because the stability during World War II was a good thing. However, he died before the war was over, so but that's history. That's what it was. That's what the greatest generation grew up in, was FDR America. So
It's an interesting idea. And there's obviously reasons pro and for and against serving more than 2 terms.
yeah.
I don't know much about FDR's presidency, so I can't really speak on the matter, but it is interesting. The first time it happened, they chose to, make the rule afterward. So
Democrat President Theodore, or sorry, Franklin Delano Roosevelt is a very interesting guy who served at a very interesting time. And quite honestly, it'd be kind of fun to do a deep dive into his presidency to see all the stuff he did, because as a human being, he really did screw up a bunch of things, but also there were some good things. He's one of those guys I think that history just carried away with it.
Yeah, I think if I recall from something that I learned a long time ago is the political parties used to have like a lot more there's a lot more things that they agreed on as far as like, they were not nearly as divisive. So there was a lot more common ground, and there was usually like when it came to votes, there was a lot of cross party voting. Um, and so at that time it would make sense, maybe for the additional terms, but I think as you got things that are kind of more and more divisive, obviously people don't want someone to be able to I guess just be in power for that long.
Yeah, so
which,
go ahead, Josh.
no, go ahead. I was changing topic, so you're on topic.
I was just going to say that the swings back then for like how much the needle changed direction back then was a lot smaller than it is now. Whereas
hmm
Trump came in and immediately tried to undo everything that Biden did. So, and I mean Biden did the same thing for Trump. So,
I must I must introduce you to President Calvin Coolidge.
it, yeah,
Oh my goodness, you have no idea. Trump is the second to do this. Coolidge was the man. But we'll have to get
there's
into that.
always a precedent.
Huh?
So it seems like there's always a precedent.
Yeah. Um, One of the things, so my topic change was because of term limits in the presidency, how it is a discussion to have term limits in the Senate as well, because one of the goals of the Constitution was a separation of powers. And we may not want to get into that discussion right now since we're talking about the presidency, but that separation of powers, if somebody remained president, commander in chief for long enough, and with those appointments he could really make a king dictator.
mm,
And
Mm.
that's the big danger there, which we see executed in another branch of the federal government. But that's to separate the powers, that means it must not stay in the same person's hand for too long. It must move along to somebody else. Once again, going back to our conversation in the very beginning of Article 1, Gage, about where we had in Florida term limits on our um, Congress, our state house, that allowed people to get cooked up. And because people left, other growing people can grow up into their place and continue growing. And that's how we have, sadly, to some people, but gladly to everybody else, Marco Rubio right now lighting fires wherever he goes, running 4 different White House offices, which he might get term limited out of. But anyway, fun history lesson for non-Floridians. All right. Anything else? Should we try to tackle pregnant paragraph 6, or was there other stuff that jumped out of you out of these first 5 paragraphs?
no, it's
Obviously, the founders believed there was wisdom in doing electors,
Mhm.
Mm.
um, spreading that I guess decision among both the rural and the urban areas, and that part of it, I would say, holds true to till today. Um, it's I know there are arguments for the popular vote, and there are arguments for the electors, but so far the electors have pretty much stayed in place for coming up on what 250 years now.
Mhm.
Mm.
yeah. What's you guys' takes on that?
I recall like, having this conversation with a friend, um, just as far as, the popular vote versus electoral, and for better or worse, the what seemed to be like the benefit of the electoral vote, I guess like that we both kind of agreed to was just if there was a trend going in any direction, culturally or politically, it's something that could happen over time, not all at once. So it's almost like a slow burn to change rather than just like something immediate. Because you have to get obviously like more people on board rather than just kind of not more people on board because that would be popular, but more people from different, I guess, backgrounds and way of life on board with the movement that the country is going. So it's not
Yeah.
just like upending their way of life overnight, because people live very different experiences.
You have to make a good case for why you should be in leadership, not just rely on slick snot marketing.
Mhm.
Going back to the five powers discussed in the um, United States Constitution, by most powerful to least powerful is the people, the states, the Senate, the president, and then the justices, the Supreme Court. And the Electoral College is made of the first two most powerful branches. And by most powerful, I mean the most unrestricted by the Constitution, the individual, and the states. So the electors are broken up: House of Representatives, which represents the number of people, and then the Senate is made up of the representatives back then of the states. So those two great powers in the Electoral College are being represented well.
Yeah, both really good points.
Because Florida may not vote for volcano preparedness like Washington State does
Yeah.
as a state, not just as a population. All right. And verse 5, sorry, verse 5. Sorry, did Bible study. Paragraph 5. Somebody asked a certain congressperson if that person would consider, if she would consider running as president, and she wrongly pointed out that it says no man shall be younger than 35, but it actually is any person. So in the text.
It does say that any person.
So Doug, you're close to being able to run for president. How's that feel?
Um, I don't know, exhilarating, but also not going to happen.
But it could.
But he could.
Could, but I won't.
It's the Doug party. All right. So should we try to get pregnant paragraph 6 done really quick, or this is who gets in power next?
Are you referring just to Article 2? I'm looking for this
So
paragraph
we're
6
still in
here.
Article 2, Section 1. We're now
Yep.
in dot 6 A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You know
I mean, if you
what?
tell me what the paragraph starts with, I'll read it. At least what it shows on the, government site.
In case of the removal of the president from office or of his
Sure.
death.
Yeah, I can read from there. And then how far
Okay.
down do you want me to go? I see there's three paragraphs until section 2 from that point.
Just read those 3 paragraphs. That'd be a nice kickoff because the rest is amendments.
Okay. It says, in the case of the removal of the president from office or of his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of the said office, the same shall devolve on the vice president, and the Congress may by law provide for the case of removal, death, resignation, or inability, both of the president and vice president, declaring that officer shall then act as president, and such officer shall act accordingly until the disability or removed, or a president shall be elected. The president shall, as stated times, receive for his service a compensation which shall neither be increased nor diminished during the period for which he shall have been elected, and he shall not receive within that period any other emolument from the United States or any of them.
All right,
Before
that should do.
he,
That should do.
okay,
That's good. So here's you read like 3 paragraphs there, but there's this whole section here
oh, I
that's
don't
all
got
made
it
up by
yet.
amendments. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, Doug has not received his book yet on the eve of the most amended chunk.
So that's what it was. So you get to tell someone else gets to,
Yeah.
add in all the added pieces.
Yep. Uh Guess both remove become able to search. Okay. We're trying to just catch up because it is so amended. It's like, what did you read? What didn't you read? Okay, I think it's 2.1.6D, and this is where the 25th Amendment really chunks out. Um, Vice President comes in. If there's a vacancy in the office of Vice President, the President must nominate a new Vice President. This person will take office. So that's a section that got amended by the 25th. Is the President's in charge of the Vice President if the Vice President gets whacked. So leave JD Vance alone because Trump will pick somebody else.
Yeah, Trump's going to appoint Doug.
There you go. One step closer.
Whenever the president believes that he or she is unable to discharge the powers and duties of office, he or she may send written declaration to the temporary president of the Senate and to the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So, president of the Senate is still the vice president of the United States. So they have to actually write down, "I can't do this," or something. But if they can't write, then whatever. Until the president sends them a written declaration that he or she has become able again, these powers and duties must be discharged by the vice president as acting president. Amendment 25, that's what okay. That's the one that says people can vote a president if they are unfit. Whenever the vice president, a majority of the cabinet, or some other group of Congress, right here, this is it, designates by law. Sorry, let me restart. Whenever the vice president, a majority of the cabinet, or some other group, Congress designates by law, agree that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of office, they may send their written declaration to the temporary president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Then the Vice President must immediately assume the powers and duties as acting president. Next chunk. If in response the President believes that no inability exists, he or she must send written declaration to the temporary President of the Senate and to the Speaker of the House of Representatives. The President will then resume the powers and duties of office unless the Vice President and the majority of the cabinet officers oppose him or her. So, he's sick. No, I'm not. We vote that you're sick. If they do, they must send their written declaration within 4 days to the temporary president of the Senate and to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, reasserting that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of office. 25th Amendment. Final paragraph of this pregnant paragraph. At this point, Congress must decide the issue. They must meet within 48 hours for this purpose. If they are not already in session, Congress must make a determination within 21 days of receiving the most recent declaration, or 23 days if they are not in session. If Congress determines that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, then the vice president will continue as acting president. This must be done by 2/3 vote of both houses. Otherwise, the president will resume the powers and duties of his or her office. So, previous president. We'll just let what all the politics say about that go on, but there was a discussion about having him removed in this manner. Not only would his vice president and his cabinet have to vote against him, but then he would have to go, the Congress would also, by 2/3, say he's unfit, something that would never happen.
Yeah, so the process has to start by the vice president and the cabinet, which all are appointed by the president against the president.
Yeah.
That's the only place that process can start.
Yep.
This isn't impeachment, though. This is something different, correct?
Correct. This is not bad behavior. This is inability to function.
Gotcha. Okay.
Discharge the powers and duties of the office.
Yeah. Cannot or will not.
It brings up a question. Who was discharging the powers and duties of the office of the previous administration?
What's that? A rabbit hole? Yes.
I want to stay out, but it's sucking me in.
No, go back.
Oh, I've got the worst comments in my head. I just no. Let's leave it. Leave it. Run away. Run away. Run away. It's the White Rabbit. Somebody get the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch on this one. Oh man, that is this discussion that is still getting played out right now. And as much as I'd like to opine on it, that is a terrible idea. Might get more views though.
Yeah.
But even in that case, would those people have made that decision, or would they have kept
It
it in?
makes you wonder what would they have to see in order to make that decision?
Yeah,
Is
Would
there?
they have to see some person dribbling and unable to speak or move, or would they have to see somebody unconscious in a hospital? What is the criteria of unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office?
there was a time in Americans' history that this got played out, and it was Ronald Reagan. He had to go in for a surgery and he got knocked out, so he signed the duties over to the vice president until he got back up. Because we were still in the Cold War with Russia at the time, those were very important duties. And then Vice President George Bush knocked himself out playing tennis. And while he was unconscious, possibly comatose, I'm not sure exactly all the details. There's somebody older than me yelling at me right now on the screen. Um, some random guy said, I'm in charge of the executive branch right now until one of them woke up.
Secretary
And
of Defense Alexander Haig.
oh, is that who it was?
Yep, I'd forgot about that till you brought it up. But yeah,
Yeah.
he stood up and said, "I am in charge," and
Kept
literally
things.
had no authority to say so.
Yeah.
But
And whatever that play was, Russia said, we have 2 hours until Reagan gets out, and it's not worth trying anything right now. So let's not.
it's pretty funny that if there was ever going to be a vice president who actually had that responsibility and got that power to have that happen to him, it would definitely have been a member of the Bush family. Like, you can't write that better.
For the record, we rub both sides the wrong way. But that's a good example because there does have to be that person is the commander in chief. Um, back when this was the 40s. Section 25 was the 40s or 50s. So this was nuclear capable world that this section was written in. And so there had to be that clear line of delineation for the armed forces because back in the original time, I mean, it was boats. Wars could take an entire week to wind up into where, like, if somebody took a week off, still the war is going on without their pressing need as much. Maybe not a week, but not like 3 hours of imminent nuclear holocaust on the face of the earth. So, all
This
right.
is very off topic, but have you guys watched The Pacific on Netflix?
No.
Oh,
You're talking about the
Band of Brothers,
from the book, The
West
Pacific.
Coast.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like that same style as Band of Brothers. Fantastic series if you guys get a chance to. You talking about how the wars were just a little bit slower back then. Just made me think of that. Very, very good. Kind of gets in the mind of a soldier back in World War II and World War One. Crazy times.
yeah. Be prepared for some very brutal scenes on the island. So,
Yeah.
If you don't get PTSD, they didn't film it right.
Truth.
Actually, back then it was called shell shock. If you don't get shell shock, they didn't film it right.
I think there was a line in there where one of the guys who survived came back and he was seeking employment, and they asked him what he had been trained for, and he said, "I was trained to kill."
Killing Jet. That's what he was trained to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Vice President Wang said, maybe not this guy. Actually, that's Chinese. Dang it. Okay, so I'm officially turning into the pumpkin. It's time for final thoughts. Reading this first section on, we haven't even gotten to the duties of the president, just on how they're elected, which is the format for this. This is a good idea, bad idea. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm with you guys as far as the electoral college goes. I think it's a more conservative approach, and I think long term it's the better idea.
What, because this is so amendmented, one of my thoughts is when you change the rules, make sure you want rules in place that your opponents cannot use against you.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a
And
lot of thought given to that.
yeah, because I mean, if you you break the rules, this go around, the rules, the precedent set are the laws have been changed so that they can be used against you, when that momentum swings the other way.
Mhm. All right. Who is closing us in prayer again?
That would be me.
All right, go ahead.
Dear Lord, thank you for this gathering and just the ability to be on fellowship and go over the text of our Constitution, Lord. I pray that you, um, as we go through this, um, just kind of the laws of the country that we live in, that you'll just give us clarity on how to interpret it and have great discussion, Lord. I pray that you just bless everybody's week and that we are able to go out and fellowship with one another and make disciples. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.